As a whole,
Yeah.
when you compare to G7 nations, we're the only one.
I've tried in this conversation to be very open about the challenges we face.
I'm just wondering what's unique to the UK.
Well, we have had...
Because everyone's had the war in Ukraine and the pandemic.
Well, yes, I think we have had a significant effect due to the openness of our economy. We've invested a lot of support into families and businesses through the furlough scheme and so on.
Lots of governments have helped,
yes, they have.
as you know. Perhaps...
But, I mean, we had the largest growth last year.
And the worst growth the year before that. I mean, we can trade those statistics.
But if you look at it over 12 years, we were right in the middle of the pack, and I accept the challenge that we need to get growth going in the economy. You
haven't mentioned Brexit. The OBR hasn't changed its view on its assessment of Brexit. Perhaps that is one of the reasons why we're different compared to other G7 nations. They still say, the OBR, that there will be a 4% long-term hit to our economy, even with all the things that you have announced today. Isn't it time to be honest with people about that?
Well, we gave people a choice. That decision was made 7 years ago. I think most people want...
But people didn't vote to be poorer, did they?
They made a choice, and we as a government are now taking advantage of all the opportunities that we can.
Do you think people voted to be poorer, yes or no?
I think people made a decision around a range of factors. Do
you think they voted to be poorer, honestly?
I think people were given a choice and they made a decision. My job as Chief Secretary is to work with the Chancellor to do the best I can whilst I'm in office today.
But that's not the big thing. The big thing is that what people voted for in 2016, what many people voted for, they voted for a variety of different reasons, is they wanted an economic model that is not dependent on unlimited low-skilled migration, which was possible when we were in the single market.
But based on what? Let's have a look at what exactly we were told. They told us UK problems are due to immigration and immigrants. Notice Jeremy Hunt's statement using the word unlimited migration. Clearly it's not unlimited, and also it's not all unskilled. There are doctors, dentists, nurses, teachers, scientists, etc., etc. But look at these headlines from the media underlining this narrative. Whereas the truth is, immigration has had a positive economic impact, and net migration per year represents only a tiny fraction of the UK population. A new report has concluded that our current immigration issue is due to under-resourcing since 2013, and Brexit has made things worse, not better. And then there were the video campaigns from Leave EU.
You will benefit from better care provided by our NHS thanks to the reallocation of funds from the EU budget.
Whereas funding has gone up, there has been no Brexit dividend to pay for it at all. Quite the reverse, so high taxes have filled some of the gap.
Controlled immigration will lead to reduced waiting times for you and your loved ones.
Whereas this is not all Brexit, staff shortages, fewer doctors and nurses has been made significantly worse by Brexit, and certainly not better.
Excess funding that would otherwise be sent to Brussels could also be directed to education, meaning better prospects for your children.
Putting aside the negative financial gain, our children no longer have access to Erasmus+, and the UK version, named after Alan Turing, is a very poor substitute. Plus again, staff shortages in education has just made matters worse.
Your wages will rise thanks to better controlled immigration, which will lead to less competition for jobs.
Putting aside the false immigration narrative here, I don't think anybody would believe this statement in 2023.
Your weekly food shop will become cheaper. Food prices will no longer be inflated by agricultural policies controlled by the EU.
Putting aside the false narrative of the not being involved in said EU processes like EU law, we were, the food trade would disagree. And when you understand what we have lost in being outside of the single market customs union, so will you.
You and your family will benefit from a resurgent economy led by new and flourishing small businesses following the removal of burdensome EU regulations and red tape.
Starting to see a very interesting pattern emerging, comparing Britain with the performance of other advanced economies. After the pandemic, there was a trade recovery by all the other G7 countries, and Britain's trade recovery has been more or less flat.
So the UK fell behind in its trade intensity.
One of the other things you can measure is the drop-off in the number of trade relationships between smaller companies in the UK and their foreign counterparts. And that's important because it tells you something about trade patterns, but it also tells you something about the way that smaller companies in the UK used to grow by gradually expanding their business, selling stuff into the European single market, and that's simply not happening anymore.
In the first 6 months after the Trade and Cooperation Agreement came into force, the Resolution Foundation has calculated that the long-run hit to wages will be £470 per person.
Brexit has increased bureaucracy. Many small businesses have really struggled to get to grips with that.
I'm Kieran Towerday. Hampstead Tea is an organic tea company. We import tea from all over the world. We were told that we would have the most amazing deal. We were going to get our sovereignty, and we were going to keep all the advantages of being the EU. As a business, we were dumb enough to believe that. Come January last year, we got an order from Italy. We shipped it as normal, thinking there'll be a little bit of paperwork and we'll figure it out. And it sat for 12 weeks in different customs houses. So the reality was very different.
Remember, when we were part of the single market, you could throw a box of tea or a packet of bangers into the back of a van in Birmingham and just drive it to Barcelona or Bonn or Brussels without let or hindrance. Now you can't do that.
You've probably heard the phrase, but not understood what it actually means, being outside of the single market. In it, there's no paperwork. You just drive. You don't even need a delivery note. Outside of the single market, though, is very different. So what have you got to do now? Well, I speeded up this instructional video so not to bore you too much. But this is the reality. The irony is the famed EU red tape is zero, and this is the Brexit red tape. Costs one local business in Marlborough £60,000 to £100,000 every year, which they just have to absorb. Sadly, other companies and businesses have either closed or moved their operations to Europe. 600 UK companies have moved to Holland at the loss of £1.5 billion of trade a year.
With less pressure on housing, younger generations will also find it easier to get on the housing ladder.
Sadly, just another lie.
Politicians, both local and national, will become more accountable, helping to strengthen your community.
I don't think I need to say any more on this one.
And others, especially those most damaged by EU policies, like farming.
Farming has only seen negative impact.
Fishing and industries like steel.
Again, the same story, just all bad news.
A more prosperous and safer future awaits us outside the EU. A vote to leave is a vote for a brighter future for you, your family, and your community.
What I find incredible is just how bad this really is, and yet we do not hear about the detail, the real impact on people's daily lives. But the tide is turning, though, because you can only suppress the truth for so long.